what we're going to do is we're going to review some literature now, live, in groups. And I need you to be in groups of about 5 or 6. Groups of 5 or 6 people. There is a mass of literature on the desk here. And unfortunately, the students that used this last year didn't put it back into the same piles. And it's a mess. It's a bit like your box of notes when you come to do your dissertation. It will be a mess, all right? But we have to make sense of the mess. And that's what you're going to do in teams of 5 or 6 now, is you're going to make sense of this mess. I've actually got the master copies, so I can make sense of it quite quickly. But you're going to have to do this. I want you to have a look through these articles in your groups. Now, you can't send all 6 people to the table, so you need to just send 1 or 2 people of your team. The rest of you can be deciding how you're going to do this, but this is the job. You have the next 20 minutes, okay? So you've got 20 minutes only. You've got to try and get some of the literature to share amongst your team, for your team to read. And when you've read it, you have a brief discussion about what you've read. And collectively, you've got to try and arrange physically for these articles to be placed on the floor in a form that almost describes how you discovered them. So you might want to say that these newspapers have done this, but these newspapers have done that. It might be cleverer than just a simple one and the other. It might be a grid, or it might just be that there's no logic, but they're still clustered, and there's 4 clusters, and they're not necessarily opposites, but there are clusters. So all these newspaper articles did this, but all of those did that. You see? So what we could do in the room right now is we could say all the people that did mind maps are sat here. All the people that did bullet points are sat here. So what you've got to do is you've got to read this mass of literature, which is a mess at the moment, and in your teams make sense of it by 1, reading it, but you can't all read all the articles. So having read 1 or 2 each, you've then got to talk and physically on the floor locate clusters, opposites, anything that describes in some way, shape or form the differences in the literature which is here. Don't forget that if you can imagine, first of all, seeing the articles with blurred glasses on. In other words, you're not allowed to read the text first. Imagine, what would you see? So you've got images, headlines, amount of space devoted to, and so on. And then as you start to read, you begin to pick up the nature of the headlines, the stance, the position taken by the articles, and so on. So, and then you might want to separate them in terms of the kind of papers, yeah? As well as the kind of stance. So sometimes the obvious is not so obvious. Just the use of visual imagery. Which papers, for example, are using no visual images? How much space of text is given to the story? Are they pro this side, anti this side, the stance that they take? All right, so there's lots of things to take into account in your review of the literature.
That pile's the introduction. We're now looking for the meat, as it were, as to reports which are well written and give the story. And that, we think, would be
a good conclusion.
the good conclusion, because it summarises it very well.
Do you reckon we can separate out the middle pile as well?
We probably can, into some which are repetitious but in a lighter way, because the sun is going to not treat it with any kind of depth, is it?
Those sort of articles seem to be completely dismissing it, whereas this one is more of an overview of other people, sort of how other papers have been reporting it, and sort of, you know, sort of saying how much of this is really sort of are we just making a big issue out of it? And then those papers seem to be more, you know, sort of like in specific incidents, something sort of about people in particular.
So far, we've sort of got a couple who they seem to be tabloids,
Yeah, definitely tabloids.
just sort of sensationalising what's happened.
That one's definitely more factual, and that one's sort of the gossip side of that article, if you see what I mean.
I suppose also we've got this one and perhaps this one as well that are looking at the lessons that have been learnt from what's happened. Like, it's not the facts of the story, it's what's going to happen next sort of thing.